Welcome back to another episode of the North Star Takes podcast. I'm Bailey Policki. He's Jacob Liberta. We're a Minnesota sports podcast, so if you're a Minnesota sports fan, please hit that subscribe button. And if you're a Wolves fan, even though they lost in Game 6 here to the Memphis Grizzlies, they got eliminated, hit the like button on this video because overall, I think it was a very successful season for the Timberwolves. They doubled their win total from last year. They went from 23 to 46 wins. Obviously, we're the 7th seed in the playoffs. They won a play-in game against a pretty much healthy Clippers team that obviously was a tough matchup for them. They were able to pull that game out at home. And they took a 2-seed Grizzlies team, albeit this Grizzlies team is technically younger than the Timberwolves. Still, they were the 2-seed. They were the second best team in the NBA throughout the entire season, if you go by record. And the Wolves took them to 6 games. They probably could have won in 5 games the way the series really turned out, basically blowing a fourth quarter lead in every single game, fourth quarter double-digit lead. So we'll kind of get into a little bit of maybe how they should, go forward here. But overall, Liberta, I mean, what are your thoughts on the season as a whole and just kind of trying to look at it from the whole perspective rather than just the disappointing ending?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to look at big picture right now just because the cloud from that Game 6 loss is still hanging over our heads. It still leaves you a little sour, a little sad that this whole thing came to an end, and feels like we left some things on the table that we could have taken advantage of. Like you said, our last 3 losses of the season were all when we went into the fourth quarter with 10-plus point leads, and it's like, how do you lose 3 games in a row like that? Like, how often does that happen? So that's kind of painful, but then it's like, take a step back, go from 1,000-foot view and look at the season as a whole from beginning to end. Like, this was a success. Like you said, we doubled our win total. We went well over the Vegas over-under of like 33 or 34 and a half or whatever it was, all the way up to 46. Yep. We clinched a spot in the playoffs off a huge play-in game victory at home in front of the crowd that was just rocking. We were there. It was amazing. Mm-hmm. And then we got into a series and made it legitimate because we won 6 games. And this had all the makings of a potential 7-game series, but again, we just couldn't hold on to a lead. And you know what? That's a credit to the Grizzlies on one hand, just because they know how to close games. They did it all of the regular season, but it's us just learning how to win. And I think that's something to be looked at in the offseason. But again, this is more time to celebrate what it was this year, and that was a step in the right direction. We came into it hoping that we would probably get to a point like this year. Like, coming into it as probably the play-in and not even quite 46 wins, but then we exceeded all that. We made it to this far. So I think you can't be anything but happy with how this season really went.
Exactly. Just digging into some more metrics, they were the number 1 scoring offense in the NBA.
That's pretty cool.
That's unbelievable considering the way they started the season. The offense really struggled, and it was they were mostly relying on their defense to win games.
Yeah, and the half-court offense was abysmal.
Yeah, and we kind of saw that obviously down the stretch in the fourth quarter of these playoff games too.
That ended up being our demise.
Yeah, exactly. So they haven't really quite figured that out, and I just think they haven't found a true identity yet. Like, are we going through Cat in the crunch time? Are we going through Ant in the crunch time? I know D'Lo thinks they should be going through him in the crunch time, and we can get into D'Lo in a little bit. But obviously they finished as like a top 12 defensive team overall in terms of defensive rating. So, I mean, obviously just a massive improvement defensively. An elite offensive team, which I don't see that changing anytime soon because we're basically keeping the same team intact, I would imagine here. So, very encouraging signs there. Ant Edwards took another huge step forward this year. I know there was that stretch in the middle of the season where his knee was bothering him. He wasn't playing well. But at the start of the season, he was very good. At the end of the season, he was very good. And he was hands down our best player in the playoffs, not even close. And I think, granted it was a 6-game series. We only won a couple games, but I think this is slowly transitioning to be Anthony Edwards' team. I mean, he's all the national media wants to talk about. He's the most exciting player. You got guys like Kendrick Perkins saying he is the franchise player for the Timberwolves, not Cat. And I just think the quicker that Cat can realize that this is Ant's team, it doesn't even have to be like an ego thing. Like, it's fine if it's Ant's team. You're still the second best player. You're still an all-star, Cat. Like, you're still a very good player. But I just think some of that pressure can be taken off of Cat's shoulders because I think Ant can handle that pressure. He's shown that. He basically said, pressure's on for game 6. I'm going to come out and play well. And he comes out and gets 20 points in the first half. He finishes with 35 and 5. Just, an elite performance from Ant. So I think obviously he is the straw that stirs the drink for the Timberwolves going forward here because he's 20 years old. averaging 25 points per game in his first playoff series. I think I saw he's the youngest player, or he has the most points for any player 20 or younger in his first playoff series ever. So just another incredible stat from Ant. Obviously, Jaden McDaniels showed some major flashes in the postseason as well. So there's definitely some great things to be looking at here in terms of just how the young players are developing. And obviously, Chris Finch as well just did a phenomenal job coaching. So what are some good things that stood out to you as well this season, Liberta?
Yeah, I guess really first talking about this recent playoff series, it really was evident that the moment wasn't too big for Ant, and truthfully
Yeah.
for our other young players too. Like for instance, Jade McDaniels or like a Jordan McLaughlin. Like these guys were incredible. I think it's really too bad we lost that game 6 because I think that's just gonna turn into a forgotten performance of McDaniels, where he had a career game, literally not just the playoffs, but like
Mm-hmm.
overall, like including the regular season and everything. Like this guy was just lights out. He rose to the occasion. It's too bad we couldn't reward that performance with a win. And I think I'm pretty excited with where those two are going. And then as far as the season as a whole, I think like you pointed out, it's just we're the top scoring offense in the league, and that's pretty cool. That's our identity. Like that's a really fun brand of basketball,
Mm-hmm.
and like you said, that should continue just because the roster feels like it should be mostly the same next year. At least I don't know why they'd make any major tweaks now, but I guess time will tell. We'll see what we
Mm-hmm.
do this offseason. But I think going into next year, yeah, I think Ant's got to be the high point. That's got to be the big positive walking away from this campaign. And I think going forward, like you said, it's more his team than anybody's. And I think that's what's going to be the driving force towards us reaching new highs, reaching new levels as far as winning playoff series or making a conference finals or under maybe going all the way to the NBA finals one day. It's just I think we probably need to take a look at the other star players if we're talking about changes. And
Right.
I guess that's another conversation. That doesn't really go with the positives here, but I guess
Well,
it's
we
just
can get
that
into that too if you want.
we can in a little bit here. But I guess reflecting a little bit more on the positives, I guess real quick, it's just I think there's a lot to like, but probably just that it all finally felt like it came together. I know we've talked. It feels like every year with the Timberwolves fans, you come into a season that's like, oh man, maybe this is the year where it finally comes together. We have all this young talent we've assembled, and it just happens. We start winning games and start being a relevant team again, and for the first time in years. But it just never happens. But it finally did this year. I mean, even after a 4-9 start. I mean, we started
Mhm.
3-1, fell to 4-9. It's like, oh man, here we go again. But then they rallied. They got back to 500, sat around there for a while till they got to about the end of January. Then we finally started taking off. And by the All Star break, we were like, or after the All Star break, we got to 10 games over 500. I mean, this team was humming, and quite frankly, it was one of the best teams in the NBA down the stretch. So I think there's a lot to like there, and it's just the team's ability to overcome adversity. I know it didn't turn out for us in the playoffs in the end by losing in 6 to the Grizzlies, but like to especially respond from that game 3 loss and pick yourself up and win that game 4 was huge. Like I think
Yeah,
that says a lot about this team's resolve, and I think that's something we can hang our head on going forward.
for sure. And I know I mentioned Chris Finch before, and I always stand on the table for him. I just think he's done a fantastic job.
Absolutely.
There were certainly moments throughout the playoff series he was out coached, which you can kind of expect. I mean, it's his first time being a head coach in the playoffs too.
Hmm.
But I think just the level of respect the players have for him, you can just tell. You know, they all talk about Finchie's coach of the year, and
Yeah.
Pat Bev will stand on the table for him. Ant will stand on the table for him. Cat, who was super close with Ryan Saunders, I mean, he loves Chris Finch, and obviously, the way that whole exchange went through. I mean, you could understand if Cat wasn't a big fan of Chris Finch, but so I think that's huge. Chris Finch has the support of his players. He did have the support of D'Lo, and I'm curious if he still has that support after benching D'Lo for the last 5 minutes of Game 6. But D'Lo was atrocious, and Jordan McLaughlin was playing a fantastic game. And I don't know, the D'Lo thing is fascinating, and we can obviously get into this way more at a later date because we'll have all offseason really until NBA free agency and the draft kind of kick in. Nothing will really happen until then, I'm sure. So, but yeah, D'Angelo Russell, extremely disappointing playoff series. Um, he only averaged 12 points a game after averaging like 31 a game or something against the Grizzlies throughout the regular season. And turning the ball over, lackluster play. Obviously, taking bad shots, missing good shots. Like, he just didn't play well at all. He didn't seem very confident, and I saw his leadership just completely evaporate. Wasn't in team huddles when he was sitting on the bench. Apparently, he wasn't in the very last huddle at the end of the season. Every game they all put their hands in the middle and whatever. And apparently, after the last game here, he wasn't in the huddle for that. And so I kind of question that, because he seems like a guy that when things are going well, he's there and he's all for it. He's excited, but when things aren't going well, specifically for him, he just kind of fades away or doesn't want anything to do with it. And I don't know. I just feel like there's some weird energy there with D'Lo. And, we're paying him max money is the other thing too. And he's coming up for a contract. It's just, I don't know if I can justify even keeping him around for next season, because obviously you'd lose him because you're probably not going to pay him to give him a big money extension. I don't know if anybody would, but I felt like in this playoff series specifically, with him being the third option, I mean, teams were focusing on Ant and Cat hardcore, or the Grizzlies were, I should say. And he was the third option. He had some open shots. He had some opportunities to make plays, and he just simply came up short. So obviously Cat had his frustrating moments in this series too, but I mean, what's your overall take on just D'Lo and Cat together, I guess, moving forward here?
Yeah, D'Lo was certainly a big letdown this playoff series, especially when everybody probably had high expectations for him coming into this just because of the success he had against the same exact Memphis Grizzlies team during the regular season. I get the playoffs and the regular season are two different things, but at the same time, like the matchups, like how much different is it? And yeah, it was underwhelming. Didn't really show up. I mean, he had the 22 in game 3, but again, that was a forgettable performance because of the way we lost that. Because we had that 26-point lead in the second quarter. Everybody knows about the 25-point lead by the middle of the third quarter, and it just fell apart. We lost, so it's like that's just a forgettable thing. So it's like, what did he do for us as far as in the games we won? It just didn't feel like a whole lot. So really, it's like we're paying this guy $30 million, and then we can't even turn to him in an elimination game where we have to sit him down with 5 minutes left and bring in Jordan McLaughlin. And I mean, credit to Finch for that. Even I think that takes some stones to roll him out there when the game's on the line to do really what's best for this team as far as winning the game and staying alive. Especially when you got your max player and you got J-Mac coming out the bench making a little over $1 million or whatever he does. So it's like the politics and the optics of that is like that's something to seriously consider. But he didn't care. It was all about winning. So I mean, that's great. But going back to the whole D'Lo thing, it's just I think you mentioned this to me the other day, Bailey. You said that it made sense bringing in D'Lo when it was like him and Cat, but now that Ant's kind of in the picture and he should be the focal point, I just think that feels like that now D'Lo doesn't fit anymore, and I think it's really you got to consider moving off of him and seeing what else you can do with this team to maximize the money that we have, because I know he's making 30 mil, so like that could probably be better used on something else. So I think that's a serious conversation that'll need to be had this offseason.
Yeah, and I mean, we can obviously get into this at a later date because I don't know of all the free agent point guards or, who's all going to be available this summer. Mm-hmm. But just my quick Twitch thought is that, I mentioned that to you. Russell is a shoot first, try to create his own shot point guard. And it made sense at the time because him and Cat were going to be the dynamic duo. Yeah. And everyone talks about, did the Wolves win the trade? Did the Warriors win the trade? I think they both won the trade. The Warriors didn't want D'Lo. The Wolves, nobody wanted Wiggins. That guy was a bum. No. He was making max money, and everyone was thrilled when we got that contract off the books. Yeah,
I'll never regret that trade.
I won't either. I mean, getting rid of Andrew Wiggins was massive for this franchise. Don't get me wrong. And that kind of cleared the way to Anthony Edwards too, because we were terrible that following season. D'Lo was injured, Cat was injured, and we ended up getting the number 1 pick. So. I just the Wiggins trade doesn't bother me one bit. I'm happy we made the trade for D'Lo. I was worth a shot, and D'Lo has, he actually had a pretty good season overall. I mean, his shooting wasn't great all season. I think he averaged like 18 points a game, but his assists were pretty good. I mean, he played pretty good defense in our system that we had. He was kind of the free roaming safety type player. So, but I think when it comes down to it, he's not a playoff player, and that's okay. But you can't bring the team down with you. And that's the problem with him being the point guard is he'll dribble the air out of the ball. The offense doesn't get rolling until 10 seconds left on the shot clock. He'll hand somebody a grenade with 2 seconds left and they kind of have to chuck up a shot. Like, There's just a lot of that going on. So my quick twitch thought is just if you can somehow, if there's a team that's willing to take them, get a halfway decent power forward in here. I like Jared Vanderbilt, but I think he's probably a bench player. So get a legitimate power forward in here that can play next to Cat, that is a shooting threat, so that nobody's not guarding him. And then you clear some cap space that way, because hopefully this power forward's not making max money by any means. Yeah. And then you could potentially bring in another point guard that obviously isn't going to have the scoring acumen of D'Angelo Russell, but guys I think of, Jalen Brunson's played really well for the Mavs. Somebody's going to pay him. Sure. Tyus Jones is going to get a good chunk of change this summer from somebody, because he's been fantastic for Memphis. His shot's really improved. The Wolves don't need a 20-point per game scorer at the point guard position, because Anthony Edwards is a shooting guard and he's going to score 25 points per game for the rest of his career. So I think with how dominant on the ball Ant is too, like Ant can bring the ball up the court. He can initiate the offense. We just need a point guard that's like Jordan McLaughlin, honestly. And maybe McLaughlin's worth a shot at starting. I don't think he's really starting material. Yeah. There's also Jalen Noel off the bench. I think Noel deserves more minutes too. And that could factor in with, do you keep Malik Beasley around? So there's all sorts of moving parts. But McLaughlin definitely needs more minutes. And I think D'Lo being gone certainly gives him more minutes, whether it's as a starter or a bench player. But regardless, I think, to sum it up, I guess this was kind of long-winded, but I think a change at point guard is necessary, because I feel like it's dragging Ant's development down just a little bit, to have almost a ball hog type point guard. And not to say that D'Lo's like a jerk or anything, but I don't think he's the greatest leader either when things aren't going right. And it's going to be the Ant and Cat show. Everybody knows that. They're the two best players. So if you can get more value, moving off of Russell, clearing some cap space, getting a better power forward in here, because we do need some size still. That just makes a lot of sense to me. So I guess, what are your thoughts on that whole scenario?
Yeah, I like that idea. I think we could probably take D'Lo out of the equation and put in a big who can play next to Cat, make it a little bit easier for him. And I know Vando certainly, I think, was very admirable starting at the 4 all season.
For sure.
I think he was a great offensive rebounder, great energy guy, glue guy, as basketball pundits would like to say. But like you said, maybe he'd be better served off the bench. And I think there's certainly opportunity there. Again, it depends what the market looks like, who's available and who's not, whether it be via trade, free agency, whatever it might be. Yep. And just having a point guard like McLaughlin or somebody out there that can just play with pace, but it's like going to make good decisions and it's going to set guys up with great shots. And I think that feels like what we need at this point. Like you said, I think that'll open up Ant's development a little bit more.
For sure. And another thing I'd like to mention too is I don't want to see Patrick Beverley playing so much. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, he came in, he established a culture, he held guys accountable. I mean, the defense wouldn't be nearly what it is without him. So I think Pat Bev did an amazing job this season, but he's guilty of a little bit of the same stuff too. I mean, he should not be trying to initiate offense on this Wolves team. When you got Ant out there, when you got even D'Lo should be initiating over Pat Bev. Ideally, Pat Bev is a bench player. He's 6th man of the year type player.
Yes.
So I think next year what you'll see is Pat Bev will go to the bench, Ant will be the 2, and Jaden McDaniels will be the 3. And then whoever the power forward is in that scenario, I mean, it could be Vando, but I'd still like to see them get somebody else in there. Vando can move to the bench. Pat Bev can move to the bench. Then maybe your starter is, maybe it's Jalen Noel. Maybe it's Jordan McLaughlin. Maybe it's a guy you sign in free agency. Maybe you draft somebody. I don't know. I'd like to see them draft a center, because I think, that's the thing too, is like you could package like a D'Lo and Naz Reid, because I think Naz is easily replaceable now on this team. I mean, he played like crap in the playoffs. I mean, it was his first playoff series, so I can't be too hard on him. But he's an undersized center. We need size, especially when Cat gets in foul trouble. Greg Monroe even kind of showed in that little spurt he played that, size is important. I mean, he got some good rebounds. He was able to score down low. So if you could ship out D'Lo and Naz, which it's not even like a necessity, I don't think, but I think that'd be an avenue of making your team better.
Yeah, that certainly. I think if you could find some destination of some team that's willing to take them on, I think, you got to kick the tires on it and see, just because maybe you could rework this roster just a little bit where maybe pieces start to fall into place a little bit better as far as like a championship puzzle goes. Like this is an imperfect roster, but that Finch got the absolute most out of. So you got to think about what's going to help us climb the ladder now.
Exactly. And one last thing I'd like to mention is Finch kind of mentioned this in his last press conference too. But, the Wolves were the 7 seed this year. It was a fantastic season. But this should be the floor now. Like the expectations need to be higher. They need to get better. And the problem is next year the West is going to be better too. Denver is going to be back at full health, assuming everybody comes back. The Clippers, Kawhi will be back next year. The Clippers will be tough.
Yep.
The Lakers, I'm sure the Lakers are going to make some sort of move, whether or not it turns out to be a good move. I mean, the Lakers are going to do something. Portland, I guess it remains to be seen, but it sounds like they're going to keep Damian Lillard around, and they've cleared up cap space to potentially make a run at somebody. So I'm not exactly sure what their situation is. So there's all sorts of moving parts, and you have to look at who's in the playoffs right now in the West. I mean, who's really going to fall out? I mean, Memphis is not going anywhere. Phoenix probably isn't going anywhere until – Chris Paul is old and out of the league, and even then, they still got some really good role players. Dallas is really good with Luka. Denver still made it with Jokic dragging them. Like Utah might be the one.
New Orleans.
Yes, New Orleans shouldn't have been in there though. I mean, you could swap them out with the Clippers.
Yeah, there you go.
But even then, if they get Zion back, that could change some things too.
Yeah, true. That's true. I guess we'll see. Like I said, we're at to take steps forward. Like all those teams are going to get better, but so should we.
Exactly. That's the main thing is we just need to keep getting better because in reality, with the talent we have and the potential we have, the Wolves really should be better than some of these teams. I mean, we should be on the rise, kind of like the Suns have been over the last couple seasons. I mean, the Suns kind of took an accelerated drive to that, but the Wolves could be on that same sort of path.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it just really escalates with, or coincides, I should say, with Ant's rise to superstardom in this league.
Yeah, that's a good point because this team will go as far as Ant goes, and I have way more faith now that I saw him play in a playoff series, and he showed up for basically every single game.
Absolutely, yeah. There wasn't any games where it felt like he was missing.
Exactly. So do you have any other final thoughts here on the Timberwolves before we take off, just kind of recapping this fun season?
It was a heartbreaker of an ending, but I mean, that's what happens to every team besides the team who ends up cutting down the nets, just winning the championship at the end of the day. So realistically, yeah, it's going to sting and it should, but it's nice to know it's good in a way. It's like good to feel that because it's like we're playing in games that mean something, games that have some really importance to them, that it feels like we're making progress and going somewhere. So I think it hurts, but it's like this is just one of those natural steps you take as a franchise towards trying to win a championship. So I think that's exciting in its own way.
Yeah, it should really just be the beginning of something great to come, hopefully.
Exactly.
And it's just a complete opposite feeling of like when the Vikings lose in the first round of the playoffs or something, or the Wild. It's like the teams that keep getting there and keep running into that wall. It's like the Timberwolves overcame a gigantic wall, and they did it without like a Jimmy Butler. This is kind of their own iteration of this team. So it's like,
absolutely,
that's what makes it exciting. And you'd hope it just gets better from here on out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I know. That's what I'm hoping for. If we can keep going, hopefully, I mean, with the raised expectations, I think that's pretty fun to go into a season where you feel like this team could be a contender in the West. So I think I'm excited to see what we do with this roster and with this team in the offseason.
Absolutely. So that's going to do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Please click the like button on this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Feel free to give us a follow on both Twitter and Instagram and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. How do you feel about this Wolves team moving forward? What are your thoughts on the season as a whole? And maybe some off-season moves you'd like to see them make. So let us know your thoughts. And until next time, thanks for watching.